I love exploring the unseen world. I wanted to understand the role of microbes in shaping our health. So this is the only company focused on the microbiome. This is where the majority of your DNA comes from. This is why the microbiome is so important. Here's what we discovered through the Human Genome Project that really blew our minds. We have fewer functional genes than an earthworm does. We have 150 times more microbial DNA than human DNA in our system. Here's what would happen if you woke up with zero bacteria in your system. Here's how long you would live without a microbiome. We've built an anti-human world. A pregnant woman with a leaky gut can lead to an infertility problem for her future daughter. This signal from the microbiome lowers the production of testosterone from the pituitary. We looked at a strain to break down microplastics. This is the only longitudinal study of aging. This is the best predictor of long-term disease formation. Your skin has 35 times more bacteria than skin cells. This is imbalance before the gut. The face has low diversity in terms of microbial population, so minimize the antimicrobial actions. This is how to clean your face. So here's the key to preventing body odor. Fungal overgrowth of the skin leads to an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia. Here's how the sun exposure increases and improves the skin microbiome. This is the most therapeutic thing you can do to your mouth.
Kiran, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to see you.
It's always great to see you. We were just joking around before we started recording that we were literally this close to one another in Phoenix recently, and we were just so busy and pulled in so many different directions we didn't get to connect. So
Yeah.
love seeing you, love connecting with you always. I know our conversations that we've had have always been enlightening, and certainly this is going to be one of those enlightening conversations. For those people who don't know about your work, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what inspires you to do the work you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to be able to see you as well briefly. I think we got to share a hug quick, but we didn't really get any quality time to sit down and talk. And thank you as always for having me on here. I realized early on one a talent I have, and there's not a lot of talents, but this is really one of the ones that I honed in on is my ability to explain complex things to people in a way that they understand. I've always had a love for the sciences. My mom was a medical doctor. My dad was a microelectronics engineer. So I got a good mix of, mathematical hard engineering science with the softer biological sciences. So I think both of that is kind of seeped into my brain. And I had an undying curiosity about the world around me and how natural things work. And so I went into the world of microbiology because I also love this concept of pioneering fields. Microbiology has always been a world of pioneering because it's an unseen world. It's invisible to the naked eye, right? But it influences everything, everything in our environment, everything in our bodies, and so on. And lucky for me, once I got through my undergraduate work and started doing some of the graduate research, the Human Microbiome Project kicked off, and that became like a beacon of calling, if you will, because that was exactly the area of interest that I had, where I wanted to understand the role of microbes in shaping our form, function, and potentially disease pathways and disease pathologies as well. So it became a perfect opportunity for me to dive into this world of the gut microbiome. And I've always been an entrepreneur with an entrepreneurial mindset. So I knew I had to develop and innovate and do something in that space. So I went into research first. I started with doing clinical trials for companies. Then I went into product development, ingredient development, fermentation studies, and then finally built a company called Microbiome Labs, where we had aimed to be the preeminent microbiome therapeutics company with the focus on the microbiome. I think we were, and maybe Microbiome Labs still is, the only company in the healthcare practitioner space that is solely focused on the microbiome. I think there's lots of companies that have lots and lots of products, and they do a lot of products well, but many of them have 300-400 SKUs that touch virtually everything. we said we wanted to do this really well and really, and build the right tools for clinicians. So that's how I got into the world of the microbiome and microbiology, and I've learned that my core purpose is empowering people with knowledge that can make an impact on their life, right? And it's knowledge that may be hard for them to seek themselves, right?
Mm.
Not your average person simply can't sit down and start reading microbiome papers and understand the meaning of it. So I want to be a whisperer for them, and decipher the meanings and the importances of that information.
I love that. You're an awesome orator and speaker, and you do that very well. You take complex ideas such as the microbiome. I don't know anything more complicated than the microbiome.
Yeah.
And evolving, right? That's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like new information coming out daily about things that kind of change our whole perception of the microbiome. So I'm sure there's a lot swirling through your head as well, and you've got to take that and make it easy for people to understand, and make practical as well, because there's lots of great information out there, but it dies at the end of the practicality sword, right? So
Yes.
if it's not actionable and easy for people to implement, then you're better off not knowing the information than knowing it and not
Totally.
action it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what surprised you the most about the microbiome? But before you do that, maybe just so somebody who's new to that term, who's never heard that term before, I know we have several microbiomes in different parts of our body, but what exactly is a microbiome, and where do we find them on our bodies? And then what's the thing that surprised you the most in all of your studies?
Yeah. So the microbiome is the totality of microbes and all of their genetic elements as it relates to the host. So what we would call the full ecosystem, which connects all of the different microbiotas. So then when we speak about a specific ecosystem, the most accurate way to do it, and a lot of people don't say it this way, and I often don't either, but when we're talking about the gut, we would refer to it as the gut microbiota, or the skin microbiota, or the oral microbiota, but all of them in totality is the microbiome. But we often say gut microbiome, oral microbiome, which is totally fine too. But if people hear those terms, I don't want them to be confused by it. And the important thing is that other part, the genetic elements. I said it's the totality of microbes and the genetic elements as it relates to the host. Now, the genetic elements is a key part to why the microbiome has become so important. So, when we did the Human Genome Project, which was in the late 90s and early 2000s, in fact, one of the labs I worked in, a biochemistry lab at University of Iowa, was part of the Human Genome Project. And I remember the excitement around all the sequencing and identifying the genes and all that. It did leave a massive gap in understanding, because the estimate prior to the sequencing of the human genome was that we'd have a minimum of 250,000 functional genes, because of how complex we are as organisms, right? Because we knew at that time, Drosophila, the fruit fly that people have been studying, has 12,000 functional genes. Earthworms, for example, have 30,000 functional genes, right? We're like, well, we're way more sophisticated by order of magnitude than that. We have to have 250 plus. As it turns out, we have 22,000 functional genes, right? Less than an earthworm does. And that left a big gap in the understanding. Is like, wait, how is it that we're so complex then? That's when that was part of the impetus around the Human Microbiome Project, was maybe microbes in our system, knowing that humans likely had some of the most diversity, highest diversity within the microbiome, within the mammalian community. Maybe the microbes offer us genetic capability. And as it turns out, we have 22,000 functional genes in our human genome, and that number may be increasing, because what we thought was some junk genes are actually functional, but it's still way less than we estimated. We have 2.5 million microbial genes in our system, right? And so as a result of that, we have 150 times or more higher amount of microbial DNA in our system than human DNA, which means that we use microbial DNA for coding, for making proteins and other compounds, probably more than we use human DNA. And that's where a lot of the functionality comes from, right? And so and to answer your question, what surprised me, there are really two things that have really surprised me about the microbiome. Number one is the the degree of functionality that the microbes afford us, right? And then the scary thought of what if they're not there? How do we function, right? And we're seeing that in disease processes, right? And then number two, the ability of microbial communities from distal parts of the body to communicate and influence one another. So we know with a high degree of certainty that microbes from the lungs, for example, can talk to microbes in the gut, or microbes from the gut can influence the microbes on the skin. Microbes on the skin can influence microbes in your mouth or even in your cerebral spinal fluid. So the ability of microbes to communicate through this complex ecosystem and structure of the human body is really fascinating. That's another area that I think will start bleeding into this realm of potentially quantum biology, right? They may be communicating in methods that we're not yet familiar with in terms of existence. So there may be some quantum biological ways in which they're talking to each other.
Uh, my license plate, I just got my new plates and they say sub-ec, which means all one, right?
Yeah.
In a quantum world, everything's entangled. So I'm so curious to see what your findings are. What piqued my curiosity, and I was thinking it, and then you said it, so there's some entanglement here, is what would happen if somebody woke up tomorrow and there was zero bacteria in and or around their body? What would happen to that person? What would that look like?
Great question. And actually, there's studies around this because you can do this with mice. Right. So they've done this with mice where they can wipe out their entire microbiome. So these are called no-biotic mice. And there are lines of these mice that exist that people have developed for studying the microbiome specifically. And if you don't have any microbes, even if you're eating food, you're drinking water, you're resting, you're doing all the things you're supposed to rest, the estimate is that the individual may be able to live for a matter of months before systems start to completely collapse, right? So we just start thinking about very high levelly, right? Your immune system. Your immune system requires your microbiome to function. So your microbiome acts as like the eyes and the ears of your immune system, right? So when there's an invading organism, for example, that comes in order for your immune system to actually respond to the presence of that organism, it's looking for signals and cues from the local microbes in the area where that organism infected. Now, the reason for that, and it makes sense when you really think about it, because your system inside is covered with microbes, right? You've got bacteria, viruses, fungi, and all that all over the place, and you have more of those than you have your own human cells. And so your immune system has to have a degree of discernment of what it's attacking, because if it's just attacking microbes, it's going to be constantly attacking everything in your system. And so it's developed this relationship with commensal microbes where the commensal microbes alert and create an activation threshold for the immune system to go, that's something we need to pay attention to. That is new in the ecosystem. Right now, people who have, and we see this in for example, if you end up with a viral infection prior to taking antibiotics, it takes you much longer to clear that viral infection. We saw this in COVID, people with known dysbiotic guts, and there was a lot of great work done by University College Cork, Dr. Liam Mahoney and his group, where they were able to type the microbiome of individuals. So if they had really high pathobiomes, what that means is they tend to have an imbalance of too many pathogenic organisms, their risk for developing severe complications from COVID exposure, including hospitalization and death, was a magnitude higher than individuals of the same age with a more balanced microbiome, right? In fact, they got so good where they could look at someone's microbiome and predict whether that individual ended up either dying or with long haulers disease. Right. And that speaks to the fact that the microbiome plays such an important role in the function of your immune system. And your microbiome plays such an important role in your metabolism, just utilizing the foods that you consume and the energy balance and whether you produce enough sugars or fats and so on and so forth. So you can just imagine that within a few weeks, your energy balance would be completely off. You'd cease to be able to digest your food properly. Your immune system would stop functioning, and you'd likely be either killed by some sort of malnutrition or high burden of toxicity, because your microbiome plays an important role in detoxing, and or a common cold would just take you out. And so there's so many things that would go wrong. But we would absolutely cease to exist, right? And the question that you ask, I think, is really important, because this is a perspective I've had, and I think it helps people understand the circumstance we've put ourselves in, right? So we are a very elegant microbial construct, right? We have more microbial cells in our body than human cells. We have way more microbial DNA. We have all these complex ecosystems that are talking together, working together to perpetuate the health of this whole, this human, this holobiont. We've taken this beautiful microbial construct and we've put it in an antimicrobial world. Right? Everything around us is antimicrobial, right? Everything around us kills microbes, including so much of the food we put in. So we really have built, as humans, an anti-human world. And so your question is actually not even that far-fetched in terms of reality, because we're losing such massive components of our microbiome from generation to generation. We're seeing a mass extinction of functional organisms. And we see that in the data, right? And that's a scary proposition.
This may seem way out in left field, but it's timely in the sense I just read it today, is that there is a population level collapse rate of infertility at the moment. So I'm curious how much you feel like the collapse in our microbiome plays into infertility. And, there might be something esoteric in this, in the sense that does the microbiome decide if it's wanting to replicate itself, right? Or pass that microbiome signature along through the children and the grandchildren eventually. I'm just curious. I know that seems maybe a little bit out there, but your thoughts on the impact of the microbiome on fertility.
Yeah, so there's very well documented impact that the microbiome has on fertility and dysbiosis, particularly in fertility. So we can tackle it both in men and women. So there's a number of mechanisms in women. The first mechanism, which is to me even scarier, has what we call transgenerational effect on fertility, right? So if a woman is pregnant at the moment, right, and her gut is not healthy, and she's in her womb, she has a female infant growing, right, or a female baby. If her gut is unhealthy and she's experiencing leaky gut during gestation, there is a leaking through of LPS endotoxins from mom's gut into the cord blood and into the exposure to the fetus. And what the studies have shown is, if mom's endotoxins are exposed to the growing female fetus, it can create damage to the development of the reproductive organs of that female fetus that won't be realized until she comes of age where she can bear children, right? So mom's dysfunctional gut from dysbiosis, having too many pathogens, low diversity, not enough production of short chain fatty acids, all of these things, right, will lead to an infertility problem for her female fetus when she comes of age. So that's what they're showing as transgenerational impact on fertility, because it may not be that girl herself and things she did. It may be what happened to her in the womb as a result of mom's microbiome dysfunction. Right, which is mind-boggling. You think about it. Now, on top of that, when the gut microbiome is dismantled, it dismantles the vaginal microbiome. We now know pretty clearly with studies that the vaginal microbiome plays a very important role in female fertility. If the vaginal microbiome is dysbiotic, which women will often experience as high frequency of bacterial vaginosis and yeast infections and UTIs and all that, and just think about how common all of that is, right? If the vaginal microbiome is dysbiotic, it becomes so much harder for her to not only get pregnant, but then carry that pregnancy to term. So there's a direct connection between the health of the vaginal microbiome and her fertility. Now, on the men's side, we have something called the gelding effect. The gelding effect is where gut endotoxins, right? That's the G and the E in the gelding effects, reduces the production of testosterone. So when you translocate endotoxins from a leaky gut and gets into circulation, it causes the pituitary to turn off the signals for the gonads to produce testosterone. Instead, it upregulates cortisol production, right? And so now you're stressed and your testosterone levels are dropping, and as a result, your sperm count is dropping, right? And so men's sperm count has dropped 1% per year since over the last 50 years. And it's very linear, right? And the crazy thing to think about that, and it's almost hard to wrap your mind around it, is if that trajectory continues, in 50 years, we're barely producing sperm, right? Which is crazy to think. And so between just those two effects, we could see how impactful the microbiome is on this issue of fertility.
I'll ask another question that I'm curious of your response is, do you feel like the microbiome has an intelligence to it, or is it all just like randomly, synergistically working together and doing its thing? Does it have a collective intelligence?
I think it depends on how we identify intelligence, right? So it likely doesn't have a cognitive or cognition type of intelligence. What it does is it has really, really great survival intelligence, right? So the microbiome is generally, unless you put a lot of negative stimuli towards it, like we do, right? We do antibiotics and all these processed things and all that are constantly impeding the microbiome's function. But assuming left alone and within natural ecosystems, the microbiome's collective goal is to survive and propagate. And the microbes are really good at doing that, right? Because the microbes are really good at adaptation, much better than eukaryotic organisms or multicellular organisms like us. That's, in fact, a massive benefit that we have, given that we're harboring these microbes as a huge part of our functionality, is because they can evolve to changing environments much better than we can. Right. And so our cells and our DNA doesn't change very much from generation to generation. And we maintain a lot of consistency in it, but the microbes will change functionality. As a perfect example of that, right? So when you look at the guts of people that live in Japan, they now have the capability of producing a unique enzyme called beta porphyrinase. That enzyme is very unique. You don't Westerners, we don't produce it. Our guts don't, our microbiomes don't produce it. What that enzyme does is it breaks down seaweed, right? And seaweed is a very unique carbohydrate structure that's really hard for us to digest it. It's hard for our microbes to digest it even. But fish digest seaweed really well, right? And so their microbiomes have picked up the gene from fish that they eat to harbor this new functionality to break down seaweed, because they eat a lot of seaweed as well, right, through sushi. And so that's just an awesome, like, quick adaptation that we can see that is occurring. Another really interesting one, right before I left Novozymes, one of the projects that we were able to kick off is we started screening this library. We had this library of 150,000 probiotic species. We started screening this library to see if there are any species that naturally have adopted this or adapted this capability of breaking down microplastics, right? Given how ubiquitous microplastics are in our environment. Sure enough, we found one strain that has the natural capability, without doing any genetic engineering or anything, has developed the natural capability of breaking down microplastics. And this is a commensal strain that was harvested from humans and so on, which means that, our microbes are desperately trying to adapt to this crazy environment that we've created. And maybe down the road, they will provide us enough adaptation. We found there's papers on microbes that have developed the ability to break down glyphosate into non-harmful compounds, right? Given the ubiquity of that. So I think there is this innate, if we call it intelligence, drive towards survival and balance, because it's an ecosystem, and every ecosystem on Earth that is stable and thrives has that appropriate competition and balance, which allows it to evolve through different changing stimuli, right? And that's where the microbiome does its job really well, better than we can do.
Yeah, really, really fascinating to hear all of this and to put it into such wonderful context, right? There's so many directions this conversation can go in. What I'm curious about, something that you just said in regards to the microbiome, is how it plays such an important role in our behavior, right? In our how we interact with the world around us, breaking down the toxins. It almost has solutions for problems we haven't even created yet. So there's probably microbes that exist that we don't even understand their function yet because we haven't even created the problem for them to solve. Um, do you recall what that strain was that breaks down the microplastics? I'm sure people would be interested in knowing if that's available.
Unfortunately, it's not commercially available, but it was a lactobacillus. I believe it was a reuteri strain,
Hmm.
but it was a very unique strain. And when I had left, that was a project we had kicked off to try to commercialize that product. Sorry, that strain itself wasn't a product yet. But that being said, if that one microbe in the screening that we did has that capability, one of the beauties about the microbiome is this amazing functional redundancies that microbes build, right? Where you get multiple microbes that develop the same capability and they can share those genes with each
Wow.
other, right? So it can become a community state function as well. And so the likelihood is that within, over the next 5, 7, 10 years, we'll probably develop natural microbes in our guts if we maintain diversity. That's the other thing, right? We want to try to maintain diversity. And while we have a diverse, somewhat healthy microbiome, if it keeps getting exposed to these types of things, it will find a way to metabolize and detoxify those things. And microbes they just do that so well.
I love their plasticity. They can adapt to virtually any situation you throw at them.
Yeah.
Amazing. So let's do this. If you're open to it, I'd love to maybe start from our head to our toes, and maybe get an understanding from you, like just I know you're really big on practical, like actionable things that
Mhm.
we can do. So maybe just start with our the skin on our face and really the rest of our body. What can we do to maintain a healthy skin microbiome? What are a few things that we can put into action immediately?
Yeah, and I've actually been quite obsessed about the skin microbiome over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'll explain shortly why that is. Right, so there is a 65-year long ongoing study. The study is still going on of almost 4,000 subjects called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging. This is the only longitudinal study of aging, which means it took individuals in their early 20s and has followed them over the last 60 plus years, every single year, looking at biomarkers, looking at biological changes, choices that they make, food, other lifestyle things, and how it impacts their biochemistry and biology. And thousands of papers have been published as a result of that. What is so interesting from that study is one of the best predictors they have found in terms of predicting somebody's future development of chronic disease and higher mortality is the health of their skin and the appearance of their skin, right? What these researchers found was that aged skin was not only a predictor of chronic disease development and mortality, it was also an independent risk factor for conditions that are completely distal to the skin, like heart disease, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, and dementia, right? So all these things that you would never relate to the skin, your aging skin and loss of barrier function in your skin becomes a driver for those conditions, right? And it's not what we would normally think, where unhealthy skin is a reflection of an unhealthy inside. What they showed was that the unhealthy skin precedes the biological markers of an unhealthy inside, which means the skin itself is actually driving it. So, for example, they're able to find with people with psoriasis, there are specific proteins that are created during the inflammatory milieu that occurs in psoriasis, right? They find those same antigenic proteins in people's joints inflaming the joints, causing osteoarthritis or driving the process of osteoarthritis. They find those same psoriatic proteins in bones, driving osteoporosis. They can find it in your vascular system, driving endothelial inflammation and driving cardiovascular disease, right? So what happens on the skin and the appearance and functionality of your skin is critically important, and your skin has 35 times more bacteria than it has skin cells, right? So that's a long aside on the skin microbiome, and I had to mention that because I've become very passionate about the skin microbiome and leaky skin, this barrier issue, because it's so counterintuitive, right? Like I think even in our world where we are very health conscious and we think about root cause drivers a lot, skin is still kind of looked at as a veneer or cosmetic kind of thing. It's not necessarily looked at it as a independent disease driver of chronic conditions, but it is. So what can we do about our skin, right? So the face requires low diversity within the skin microbiome. You want, because it's a lot of anaerobic environments, a lot of areas where you have no oxygen because of the high production of sebum and oils and the big pores and so on. The body, what we call the dry areas of the skin, has really high diversity, and that's really good for the skin on the body. So for your face, you'd want to minimize the personal care products you're using that have strong antibacterial function, right? So unless you're a dermatologist and all, you're working with them and you've got like, some sort of process for your acne or other things, if you're just dealing with a normal routine, the most you want to do is a very light cleanser on your skin. You don't want your skin to dry off on your face, and then you want to use a healthy moisturizer. I like to use moisturizers that have minimalist ingredients in it. I found a couple that work well for me. CeraVe is fairly good for most people's face skin, especially if you're really dry. But if you put on makeup and you use cosmetics, you want to clean that off at the end of the day, and try your best to minimize the number of personal care products you use on your skin, right? On your face. On the body, you want to moisturize a lot. It's a dry part of the system. But one of the best things you can do for your skin on your body is to get in contact with the natural environment, because you've got all of these transient microbes in the environment that jumps onto your skin, and they can modulate your immune response on the skin and then impact the permanent residence of your skin in a favorable way, right? This is why being in the dirt, and people pay tons of money for mud baths and things like that at spas, right? That's why those things can be really beneficial for your skin, is because you're getting transient microbes onto your skin and then letting them do their job. So you don't want to over sterilize, you don't want to overwash. I know so many people that shower twice a day. That's a lot. That's too much. That's a very unusual thing for the microbes and the microbial balance on our skin, where we're basically cleansing and to a degree sterilizing it twice a day, right? So I would say that's one of the most important things you can think about for your skin microbiome, is just trying to reduce the things that kill off the skin, the microbes on the skin, which are going to be personal care products and cleaning, and then also increasing exposure to natural environments. We created actually a biome balancing serum, which has like a topical spore-based serum that you can use on your skin, that we've shown does a phenomenal job of helping rebalance the skin microbiome.
Does that help with acne for teenagers?
It's one of our number one uses of it. We have a 300 subject study on acne. It works extremely well. Once a day application after you wash your face, before you put on any sort of moisturizer on. It's basically 2 drops that you rub all throughout your face, and that's it. And normally, 7 days you will see a significant reduction in lesions, and in a 30-day period we see massive change in people's acne. So yeah.
Can you repeat the name of the product again?
Yeah, so this is called Siv. It looks like this, SIV. And the website is sivcare.com. And it's phenomenal. We do a lot through estheticians and skincare professionals, some degree in functional medicine. I've introduced it to some of my friends and all that in the functional medicine world. Given that the skin microbiome is so important for overall health, in some patients, the skin may be their main driver. if you have patients and you have people that are wrinkling, and what I mean by skin barrier dysfunction. So here are the symptoms of it. Fine lines, wrinkles, dryness, thinness of the skin, hyperpigmentation or discoloration of the skin, and a general redness, right? So if you have two or three of those symptoms, it's an indication that the barrier system of your skin is becoming dismantled. And so your skin then can play a role in chronic conditions.
Yeah, I mean, not that we should judge a book by its cover, but we can certainly get some key insights into what's going on the inside,
Yeah.
from the side. And I wonder, like, so many people, I mean, I find that the more women tend to be men too now, but I would say women more so, just statistically, try to take such good care of their skin. And I notice that women will look 20 years younger than their male counterpart,
Yeah.
who may not be as like actively involved in his skincare routine. And this sounds like a really simple thing that we can all do. And
Yeah.
it seems like the skin microbiome is the lead domino for the gut microbiome. But
Totally.
but many people might be missing that and just focusing on what they're eating, but not what's going on in their skin. I'm curious about, body odor. I know
Yeah.
that my understanding is that it's caused by some of the microbes that live on our bodies, not the sweat itself, because then our whole bodies would stink. But when we have body odor, usually it comes from the armpits or groin area. What are some things that people need to take into consideration for maintaining a healthy microbiome in their armpits, let's say?
Yeah. So in fact, some of the things that we would normally do actually are counteracting that. So people that tend to have strong odor from their underarms, right? What they'll tend to do because they're so paranoid about it is that they will wash and clean a lot.
Yeah.
They will use really harsh deodorants, right? And then they might even use scented things that have fragrances in it. Fragrances, have a huge negative impact on your skin microbiome. We know that, and there's some good studies on that show that it has a huge antimicrobial effect on your skin microbiome. So those are the things you're doing. What you tend to be doing is selecting for the dysfunctional microbes that create even more odor. Right. So what I would recommend to people is that if you're really concerned about body odor, especially in your underarms or other moist, sweaty areas like your groin, I would use very gentle cleansing in that area. Right. I would make sure that you really dry those areas better, because keep in mind, remember the rest of the body below the face is supposed to be kind of a dry area. And so when areas are really moist, it tends to change the microbiome of that part of the skin. And then I would use things that maybe help dry the area rather than deodorize it, right? So there are deodorants that are more that are more drying, and you'd have to look up. I'm trying to think of the brands in my head, but you don't need to create an artificial smell. What you do need is something that can bind up moisture, right? What people used to use is baby powder, but we know that that's unhealthy for you, right? You don't want to be using cornstarch in that way. But there are some drying kind of natural powders that you can use that won't harm your skin, and try to keep those areas moist. Now, from getting too moist. Then on top of that, you can use some things like gentle coconut oil if you want to have a little bit of a reduction of the microbial load in those areas. So before you go to bed, for example, you could take some coconut oil and apply it to those areas. It'll reduce the microbial load of some of those dysfunctional microbes. And then in the morning, make sure you wash it really well, and then you use a drying agent to dry it out. And then sieve. We actually use sieve in those particular types of cases as well, because it balances out the skin microbiome, right? It brings down the dysfunctional microbes and increases the good commensals. That can be really helpful for those areas too. And this might sound a little crazy, but let's say you are really dealing with this issue. I would go and get some natural dirt and put it in there. Like and I'm not talking about like your yard, that's engineered soil with with pesticides and all that on it, right? Like if you're going out for a hike, right, and you're outside in the natural environment and nobody's looking because you don't want to be embarrassed by this, take some sand and dirt from the from the actual ground and put it on there, right? You want the transfer of those environmental microbes into that area to increase diversity and create competition against those microbes that are creating odor.
Nature again for the win, right? I love that.
It does, yeah. And of course, then the sand and all that dries it out as well, which is fantastic, you know. So that those things can really, really help. A few of those things combined together.
I love that. I can already see the making of a new company.
Exactly. Armpit dirt, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Just simple. We'll just
Money
go
back
out and bottle
guarantee.
it.
Um, I also heard, and I've never tried this, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. Is somebody told me lime oil helps because it changes the pH.
Yes.
Is there any truth to that?
Yes, it can. So a pH control of the skin is a very important component to skin biochemistry and the microbiome of the skin, right? So, and you would think like, okay, wait, how do you control the pH of this external environment? But it's very tightly controlled. Like skin pH should be around 4.2, sometimes a little bit lower in some individuals, which is acidic, more on the acidic side. Now, why that's important?
Quite a
That's
bit
the
acidic.
way. It is, yeah, right.
Yeah,
And
wow.
so and the reason that's important is, and that's similar to the vaginal pH too. Vaginal pH is generally acidic like that too. The reason that's important is because that's how we naturally avert fungal overgrowth, right? So mold and fungus doesn't grow in acidic pH. They do much better in neutral pH. Some of them even do better in a slightly basic pH. So the way that your microbes control the pH of your skin is the oils that are secreted. There are specialized microbes on your skin that metabolize the oils and release the fatty acids from the
Hmm.
oils, right? And those fatty acids maintain that lower pH. So if you get a dysbiotic skin, you end up with an elevation in pH and you end up with things like malassezia, right? So fungal overgrowth. This, in fact, is a key risk factor in Alzheimer's disease. So if you have fungal overgrowth in your face and head area, right? So one of the well-known fungal overgrowth issues is like dandruff, right? And itchy scalp and dryness and all that, right? So that all is a pH issue of your skin. And then you get fungal overgrowth. There are people that can get something called perioral dermatitis or seborrheic dermatitis, which is another form of, in some cases, fungal overgrowth. It becomes red, flaky, dry, and so on. And there's studies showing that individuals with that prevalence tend to have a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia because the inflammatory and other toxigenic sources of that fungal overgrowth can make its way into the brain and cross the blood-brain barrier, creating inflammation in the brain itself, right? Similar to how if you get a lot of oral infections, especially in the wisdom teeth area, right? That is easily accessible to the brain. And so that is associated with an increased risk of dementia and cognitive issues as well. So yes, the pH balance is absolutely critical, and any sort of citrus oils can help with that.
I love that. Man, there's so much. It's like so all connected and
Yeah.
so fascinating, this interaction and this relationship with that we have. I didn't know that about the microbes and the fatty acids and how the skin is more quite acidic actually. And
Mhm.
and that maintains prevents the overgrowth of funguses and mold as you said. So interesting how just the appearance of somebody's skin can really clue us into their chemistry. So it's more chemistry than cosmetics.
Yeah.
And I think if we focus on the chemistry, then the cosmetics also improves as well.
Well, and I one of the reasons another one of the reasons I've become obsessed about the skin microbiome is to try to change a paradigm in the world of beauty and skincare and all that, where we have so many ways of making the skin appear healthy, even though it's not, right?
Yeah.
We don't really do that with the body as much, right? Like if you're unhealthy and you've got a lot of weight and all that stuff, I mean, you can get liposuction and you can do all those kind of things to try to appear more healthy. But on the skin, people do that automatically all the time. We're doing Botox and fillers and, peels and of course makeup and all kinds of things that we can do to create the appearance of healthy skin without actually having healthy skin. And my drive is going to be to get people to be more conscious of creating beauty through improving the health of their skin, right? So creating, uniformity in the skin and a beautiful glow and the right tone and texture and all that by really focusing on the health of their skin first, right? And then you can do a couple of things to make it appear better. But that is I would love to see that paradigm shift in people, where especially when they're thinking about their appearance.
Are you familiar with Jack Cruz at all?
Sounds very familiar. Yeah,
So,
Jack Cruz.
so very controversial. He's a dentist turned neurosurgeon, and
Okay.
he's really big on, kind of quantum health, so to speak. So big on circadian rhythm, big on
Yeah.
earthing, magnetism, grounding, structured water, and really like turning to nature for solutions. And one of the things that studies he was quoting, you might be familiar with this, is they identified certain strains of microbes that grew in, I believe it was an African tribe, and they couldn't identify those strains in North America, and it had everything to do with the sun. So, how much does our exposure to sunlight, from your knowledge, I guess, impact our microbiome and such?
Yeah, so it does. It can, because in a couple different ways. So number one, there are microbes on your skin, for example, that use UV light as an energy source, right? To facilitate their metabolic processes and thereby grow and have a better representation on the skin microbiome. And then there are microbes that specialize in producing antioxidants that negate or reduce the negative impact of UV radiation from our own skin cells. And so those microbes, that becomes an epigenetic switch to turn on those microbes and activate their metabolism. So we do know that sun exposure can improve the skin microbiome to a certain degree. And a healthier skin microbiome protects you even more from overexposure to sun or the damage that can occur from the sun, right? And one of the things we know is that, when you absorb UV radiation, of course, one of the negative effects is going to be the continuous oxidative stress that happens even when you're out of the sun. But that in itself is an important biochemical process for a number of microbes that manage that within your skin, right? And in fact, in some cases, that can be a signal for skin turnover by those microbes, because the microbes also then do a really great job of creating apoptotic signals, so those cell death signals, to kill off potentially senescent cells that are laying dormant, and so they can die and slough off, and you can get new skin cells that show up, right? So sunburn is an extreme version of that, right? Where you get actually a radiation burn and then you slough off a whole new layer of skin, but it's very painful and all that. It's gone too deep. But that can happen at a light level at the stratum corneum, at the very top area of the skin, with normal levels of exposure, right? So, and it all makes sense. I mean, we evolved under the sun, right? And it's like the preeminent energy source for virtually everything on Earth. And so it's not surprising that we've got microbes on the skin that actually utilize the power of the sun.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and if we're covered all the time, and those of us, you're in Canada, I know, and so you probably suffer some of the same. And those of us in the Midwest, and there's so much of the year we don't see the sun, and we know all the effects of that, right? And we know the mental effects of that and our biochemistry on the inside, but it does affect the skin as well over time.
so we've made it to the skin. We'll just get started. I love this. This is such a wonderful rabbit hole, and I love that one of the things that you're doing now is you're educating practitioners and creating certification programs for people to go deeper down this rabbit hole, and certainly I'm so interested in learning more and at a clinical level. And I know you're keeping it very actionable and practical for us at a consumer level, which I love. Now, you probably know the big thing for me over the last few years has become breathing, and
Yes.
and so that's kind of been my jam. And so I'm really fascinated to kind of help me and help others understand, how the nasal or sinus microbiome and the oral microbiome plays a role in our health, and perhaps even like you did with the skin, what are some signs of imbalances in those areas, and what can we do to correct them?
Yeah, we know that there is a increased risk of things like chronic bronchitis and potentially even COPD when the upper respiratory microbiota changes, right? And in part that's because there are microbes that are really good at driving low grade inflammation all the time, and so if your lungs are inflamed because you're breathing in a lot of these dysfunctional microbes from your upper respiratory tract or from your oral microbiome, you could be creating a milieu within your respiratory tract that drives this chronic inflammation and then thereby alveoli inflammatory responses and creating asthma or asthma related COPD like effects, right, within the respiratory tract. And then that speaks to then the importance of the oral microbiome as well. The oral microbiome is fascinating because you've got it houses somewhere around 13%, 10 to 13% of the total microbes in your system,
Wow.
right? So if you think about how huge your digestive tract is, right, and all the microbes that house there, and how relatively small your oral microbiome is, or your oral cavity is, and it houses such a large percentage on its own of the total microbiome, it's fascinating, and it tends to be one of the most dysbiotic areas in your body, right? Because we've got a lot of fecal oral contamination. We've got, people using alcohol-based mouthwashes all the time. Most of our toothpastes are going to be creating dysbiosis in our oral cavity. And of course, everything we eat, drink, and so on has high concentration exposure in the oral cavity, right? So when you think about, let's say you take a big sip of a cola of some sort, and the amount of exposure that all of the microbes in your mouth have to that cola compared to when that cola goes into your gut and dissipates, right, and gets diluted by lots of other things, the
Right.
exposure level is much more intense for the oral microbiome. So we a lot of our behaviors drive even more dysbiosis in the oral cavity. And what we find is that, and this is one of the downsides of people that naturally mouth breathe, right? And you would know this probably even better than I would. But part of the risk is you have all of this dysbiosis, and you're constantly breathing in this dysbiotic microbes without a filter. Because when you breathe microbes through your nose, you've got mucus and the mucociliary elevators and hair-like structures that can grab microbes and reduce the amount that's actually going into the respiratory tract. When you breathe in through your mouth as on a regular basis,
Hmm.
right, every breath of every day or most of the breaths of your day, you're sucking in all of these dysfunctional microbes. And so I think the health of the oral microbiome and then how you breathe as a result of that, the combination of those two can have a huge impact on your overall system, including now we know that the dysfunctional oral microbiome is very closely tied to cardiovascular disease. It's very tied to SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which then has a high prevalence of leaky gut. That high prevalence of leaky gut has a high prevalence connection with anxiety, depression, metabolic disease, right? So it all kind of tumbles from there.
Yeah, and periodontal disease is one of the most common, chronic health issues in most countries, and
Yep.
about the majority of tooth loss is actually from periodontal disease, which is spearheaded by, unfortunately, a dysbiotic oral microbiome. And that's interesting that you said 13%. Is that 13% of the strains or 13% not by volume? It'd be the number of strains. Is that it? Or
It's the number of microbes actually. Yeah. So by
wow.
like volume of microbes. So it's huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that can exist is even though there's not a lot of surface area that we know of, right? part of the issue with too much plaque building is you have microbes that live in every little micron layer of plaque. And the more plaque you build, the more anaerobic environments you create in your mouth. And then the more anaerobic gram-negative pathogens you end up housing, right? And that's one of the dangers of having too much plaque. And so, yeah, all that plaque creates, well, all that plaque creates a bunch of surface area.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a little condo for the bacteria. Keep building more floors, right?
Yep, it's a pathogenic condominium, that just and that's the nature of brushing, for example. If you talk to biological dentists like Dr. Brahana, for example, what's clear about the benefits of brushing is really the abrasive nature of the toothbrush, right? It's not the toothpaste part of it. That's just kind of creating the mint flavor and so on in your mouth. And so when we went to mechanical toothbrushes over manual ones, what you see in the statistics is that the mechanical ones, because of their efficiency and the reduction of human error, it increases the breaking up of plaque by like 60-70%, right? And that's the benefit of it. So our misnomer of like we need to sterilize our mouth and do alcohol mouth washes and all of these fancy toothpaste and all that, that's actually way less of the benefit. It's just the mechanical breaking down of the plaque that's key.
What about toothpaste that are designed to restore the oral microbiome using botanicals? Like, what are your thoughts on those? Or does that make any difference, or is it still the mechanical action?
So there are a couple of ingredients that actually seem to really help. I use a toothpaste called Fig. That's from Dr. Brahana. There's a couple other ones as well. I like toothpastes, and that one is predominantly hydroxyapatite, which has been shown to have a beneficial effect on the oral microbiome. The other compound that has a beneficial effect is xylitol. What's so interesting about xylitol? So you have a prevalent pathogen in the mouth called strep mutans, right? And strep mutans is not only is it a very inflammatory microbe causing a lot of inflammation in the soft tissue in the mouth, which can lead to periodontitis and so on. But strep mutans is also a carie-forming microbe, right? So it forms cavities. And the thing is, when you use xylitol, strep mutans metabolizes it, but it kills it as a result of metabolizing it. So it's and strep mutans, as it turns out, is one of the few microbes that is killed by the presence of xylitol. So it's such a simple and interesting thing to be able to target a dysfunctional microbe is just using a toothpaste that has xylitol in it, or even gum. So there are some studies that show that after you eat, one of the things you could do is like after you eat, you could rinse your mouth off to try to get rid of some of the excess food, but chew a xylitol gum for 10 to 15 minutes, and it'll kill off any dysfunctional microbes that are using the sugars and carbohydrates that came in from the meal to perpetuate themselves. It'll kill them off, and it'll allow the rebalancing of the good oral microbiome.
You want to hear a funny story? Like,
yes.
I love everything you just said. I'm taking tons of notes, so thank you for that. I would tell, so my son currently has Invisaligns because we're getting his teeth all dialed in. And long story short, so he has to constantly brush his teeth before he puts his his retainer back in. And I told my wife, I said, you should just have him chew gum, because that would take all the food particles and everything out. And now you're telling me that the xylitol would help kind of create the right ecosystem so that he's not having to constantly brush. Because I'm concerned if he's brushing 10 times a day, that can't be good for you either. Especially that frequency, so
totally.
This might be a viable solution for him. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if he's doing it, and it could be abrasive to the gum line and all that, which can create issues. Yeah, so I think if he just rinses it with water, try to get the most obvious food particles out, and then the xylitol gum, and so he's getting rid of the food particles. He's getting the saliva going. Saliva is, of course, the most therapeutic thing for your mouth, right? Which is the other problem with mouth breathing is you're drying out your mouth and you're drying out the amount of saliva that is bathing your microbiome. Saliva, of course, also has a lot of secretory IgA and other immunoglobulins that then manage the oral microbiome. So we want saliva in those cases, and then the xylitol component selects out the pathogen.
Wow. It's all coming together. Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
I had
and so many simple little things, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, and it just makes sense, right? It's easy to see the way you explain it. It's easy to comprehend it and learn it in a way that you're not going to forget it. I
Yeah.
had a client message me or a friend message me on behalf of a friend of theirs. Their daughter has tonsillitis, and of course, the doctors want to remove the symptom, which is the tonsils being inflamed. I love your thoughts on it. My first response was to check the way she's breathing.
Mhm.
Seems to be the lowest hanging fruit, and then we can dig a little bit deeper. But this is something that we see, I feel like, more and more. And, it's obviously the easy thing to do. And maybe even sometimes the right thing to do is remove the tonsils, but that's not really getting to the roots. Maybe you can speak into that. And if you have, like, a lot of our listeners may have children or nephews or nieces that might be struggling with this. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that related to the microbiome.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's such an interesting problem to have, right? So if you think about the role of the tonsils, I mean, they're glands that where you concentrate a battle that's going on, right? So for if people don't understand what tends to happen, if you have an infection somewhere, this is why if you have like some sort of mouth sore infection or something, a sore throat, you'll feel all these swollen glands around your neck and chin area because those end up being the battle zones of the infection. So the glands are where your immune cells are taking these invading pathogens. You're proliferating T cells and B cells to try to fight them off. So it's a really important area of defending your system. And so if your tonsils become impacted and infected permanently, it's a sign of some severe dysbiosis and a perpetual source of that dysbiosis somewhere in your system. To me, the most likely source of that is a chronically infected sinus cavity, right? And that's likely a strep-driven issue. So if you have strep or staph chronically infected in your sinus cavity, you're going to constantly be dripping that into the back of your throat as with postnasal drip, and it's going to find its way into other cavities in your mouth and so on. And then that's going to create this constant infection, and those microbes, those pathogens can even move into the tonsils themselves. And so I would say if somebody has early first couple cases of tonsillitis before tonsillectomy becomes a need, I would be really cognizant of cleaning out their sinuses, right? And what does that mean? Well, number one, you can go to an ENT and try to figure out if there are any physical blockages, right? Do they have any deviations in their septums? Are the openings to their sinuses collapsed? In some people, that can actually occur. There can be, certain polyps and all that develop that actually block flow within the sinuses. And so outside of that, outside of the physical issues, I would just use a regular mist. I really like this. Arm & Hammer makes this little spray mist that makes it easy. It's sterile. It's pressurized already. You just squirt, 15, 20 seconds in each nose. It kind of clears things out and keeps things moving. There's another that X Clear product that is xylitol in a nasal spray. And the reason why that is cool because the xylitol, just like the strep mutans in your mouth, the pathogenic strep in your sinuses will also be killed off by that, right? So I use that on a regular basis. I do 2 or 3 squirts in each side, and then it drains a lot of the mucus, and then you can blow it out. And another product I just recently came across, actually was gifted to me at the biohacking event. Let me grab it real quick. I found this to be actually really, really cool. This is Beekeepers. Have you seen this one?
I've heard. I love that company. They're
Right?
based out of Canada. Yeah, they have a new
Yeah.
product.
So this is a it's got oregano and eucalyptus, but it has one of my favorite ingredients ever, which is propolis,
Hmm.
right? And propolis is an amazing antifungal. It modulates immune response, so it reduces inflammation, and it can have some antibacterial effects as well. What I like about this is what tends to happen in people with chronic sinusitis. Often it's because their mucosa in their sinuses produces a lot of mucus in response to the environment, right? And then that mucus traps microbes and allows for
Hmm.
overgrowth, right? So you're not draining the sinuses and mucus as well. A lot of times it's bacterial, and then when you go after the bacteria, you're actually creating an environment where fungus can overgrow. So then some people end up with this chronic fungal sinusitis issue. What I like about this product is it takes care of both because you've got oregano and eucalyptus that is good for microbes, right?
Hmm.
And then you've got propolis, which is great for fungus. And the propolis also modulates immune response. So if your child has had their first tonsillitis and the pediatrician's looking in there and going, oh yeah, their tonsils are quite swollen. What you don't want is for that to happen 2, 3 more times, and then they recommend tonsillectomy. I would become very diligent about getting the sinuses rinsed on a regular basis. And kids hate it. I have to fight my kids to do it, but they'll feel so much better. And
I was going to ask you if the oregano oil burns.
oh, so the this one actually magically does not.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of magic beekeeper did to make this not burn. The X Clear has a version with oregano and I think eucalyptus as well, but definitely oregano. That one does burn. But this one doesn't. It's actually quite pleasant. I actually like how it feels. Because as soon as you do it, and then of course it drains, and you'll need to blow your nose after a few minutes, it just feels so clear.
Hmm.
I feel I can get a deeper breath and it feels much nicer. And I'm sure for people that are doing like a lot of your breathing exercises that you teach so well, this might be something cool to do beforehand just to clear out the airways a little bit, right?
Yeah, I was literally thinking that. I'm like, I got to add this to my repertoire. Just bring a bottle for each person
Totally.
and
Yeah. Because
have them.
one of the times I've had the privilege of going running through your breathing programs a couple of times at the event we were talking about. And one of the times, because it's May in Arizona and there's like allergens in the air. So my sinuses and my mucus and all will start going a little bit crazy. And I remember sitting in the room and I'm like doing the exercise. I'm like, and it's all making all these sounds like, because of all the snot and mucus in there. And I'm like, oh God, I hope people aren't hearing this. And I didn't have a napkin and I didn't want to get up and like disrupt the flow and like blow my nose loud. So I was like, oh, I should have blown my nose before we started. But yeah, something like this or the X Clear spray before you start, I think you would be awesome for people.
Okay, I love that. I'm gonna make note of that. I'm gonna actually go pick some up because you've got me intrigued to know what it feels like to do that. I put something called Nasya oil in my nose,
Mm-hmm.
is like a Ayurvedic formula, but I like the idea of the propolis in
Yeah,
there.
and the misting. So it's called Beekeeper's Nasal Spray Max. Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad I got it. I would have never found this on my own, and so speakers get swag bags of stuff, and this was in there, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I've loved it since.
Yeah, they have good products. They have a throat spray as well.
Yes.
Great for people who speak a lot.
Hmm.
Actually, there's propolis in there as well. Or if you ever have a sore throat, that stuff works like magic.
Yeah, it does.
Now, we talked about the nose. I'm curious about what your thoughts are on like a neti pot or, uh,
Mm.
something like a navage to kind of rinse out the sinuses. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I used to use an neti pot, and I find that the misting sprays work a little bit better.
Hmm.
And the reason is I feel like they get deeper into my sinus cavities, right? And one of the problems with the neti pot is that you have to make sure the water is super clean that you're using, and so when I used to use an neti pot, I would have to sit there and boil the water and make sure that I'm not introducing any new pathogens and all, because you're getting tap water or and so on, and then you sterilize it, then you add their packets to it, and then you're doing it. but I found that it goes in one solid stream because it's coming out in a solid stream, and on my side it just comes out as that solid stream. When I use the sprayers that are more misting, it takes
Hmm.
longer to come out because it's misting, and the volume and the water pressure going in is not as much. But as it comes out, it's coming out in like larger clumps. and
Hmm.
so and so when I'm done, I feel like I'm just so much more clear. So I think for those two reasons, I've kind of stopped using the neti pot over the misters, because I get much more out of the clearance from the misters, and then I don't have to worry about the water and all that. And the neti pods started becoming a real problem for me when I travel,
Hmm.
right? Because I don't have access to boiling and cleaning the water, and so like I'm like running to Walgreens from my hotel to try to get like nursery water that's clean, and I was like, never mind, I got to find a different way to do it. But
Well,
if
I
for some
love.
reason it works for people, that's fine. But I like the
Yeah, no,
mysteries.
I mean, this logically makes a lot more sense,
Yeah,
and I I'm gonna borrow that because I travel quite a bit, and taking a Navage with you takes up like a big chunk of your suitcase if you're just taking a carry.
totally.
And then yeah, you have to worry about the distilled water, so you can't just use tap water from the hotel. So it does become an additional mission. So this seems like it solves that issue, and you could do it from anywhere. You don't have to like be in your hotel room. You could do it at the airport or on the plane or wherever you need to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I actually do. So I use a combination of these types of misses. This one of the X Clear, and then I have the little cans of their Arm & I think they're Arm & Hammer. They're called like Simply Saline or something like that, right? They're the pressurized cans, and I actually do carry those with me on the planes, especially long haul flights, or if I'm going to be at the airport for a long period of time. And then I'll just go to the bathroom in the lounge or at the airport and do a little bit of cleaning and just feel so much better. And we know we're trapping all these pollutants and microbes and all that, viruses from all these people around you in your sinuses. So it's nice to clear all that out after you're done.
Uh, Karan, you've been very generous. I want to be sensitive to your time. Do you have to be anywhere? Or do you have time for a
Oh,
few
I
more?
do have a meeting actually at 3:30 right now.
Okay. So let me just do our closeout and then I'll edit this part out. Karan, this has been super, super valuable. I loved everything I'm hearing. I took a ton of notes and I'm so excited to release this to our audience. Thank you once again. I'll be sure to grab all the links from our interview today and certain to really spread this far and why this was super helpful for me personally. I can already think of a few clients that this is going to be super helpful for. I'm excited to share it with them. And I hope everyone who's listening here got a ton of value. We'll have to do a part two and maybe even a part three because we got here, we got to the skin.
We did make it down, yeah.
But you've definitely opened up Pandora's box for me, and I'm ready to go a little bit deeper. So thank you again. Appreciate you. I know how busy you are, so I want to honor your schedule and your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And here's to amazing health and happiness to you and your family. And keep spreading the light, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.